Hi, welcome to this conversation on presentation skills, another very essential skill that every manager needs to demonstrate. Managers virtually with multiple frequencies tend to use this skill set very often. This is what makes you or breaks you in an organization. And a lot of times, presentation skills become very, very relevant as we start moving into senior positions in an organization. So, the focus of this conversation today is presentation skills, backed up with a lot of different validation through workshops that we've done in various organizations worldwide with a whole lot of leaders that we worked with and different titles that we've created. So we ourselves have done a lot of work in terms of creation of presentations and delivery of presentations. And that's the insight that we will bring through while we move through this entire aspect of presentation skills. Like I said, presentation skills is one of the most essential factors because that's what creates a perception in the organization for yourself. It is a part of your growth process. As you evolve in the organization, you start having a social identity. And as you have a social identity, you're invited in different forums to actually give a presentation. And therefore, we thought that we will bring to you this particular conversation on the presentation skills. Can everybody present naturally? No. But can you develop the ability to present? Absolutely. And what do we talk about? We talk about practice, practice, and practice. And that's what we're going to talk about as we move through this entire presentation skills. Remember, I will keep talking about three aspects, everything, every time it's important. So practice, practice, and practice. So three times is very important because once you practice before you deliver, then you practice after you've delivered, and while you deliver there's a major practice that's going on, so it's very important post presentation to audit your presentation. While you present, it's very important to keep the self awareness high, and before you create a presentation it's extremely important to plan the presentation. Well, I come with a very strong behavioral background, and therefore, while we go through this presentation, we will be discussing different aspects, which are behavioral aspects of personalities and how presentation needs to work through that. But I come from the operations background, and I've created a whole lot of titles, and I personally do a lot of presentations, and therefore, I thought it makes good sense to really bring about this whole concept of presentation in front of you. So, what is the significance of presentation? Presentations are normally done for exchanging ideas. Presentation is a great place to influence people. And when you're influencing people, you're influencing them through your verbal, non-verbal, and the kind of thoughts that you could put across in the presentation. A lot of times thoughts are beautiful, but they're not properly sequenced. So we will work on that. Presentation is the right place for creating a fantastic perception about yourself. That's when you create a great impression for yourself. Presentations are useful in terms of fast tracking of your career path because as you move into senior positions, presentations really matter. And presentations are also a great tool because your social identity emerges end of presentations and you actually create very strong relationships for yourself. Presentations, well done, actually create a great confidence and bolster your belief systems for sure. Let's start off with the four P's of presentation. Needless to say, we need strong preparation before we go for a presentation. Yeah. However, before that, we need to plan the presentation, right? So we plan the presentation, we prepare the presentation, we prepare hard, we practice hard, and then when we move into presentation, it's very important to enjoy the presentation. So how do you plan the presentation? You must know what your audience is. You must actually have an empathy map, or what I call the ethnographic survey, where you need to know what is it that is essential for the audience that you're dealing with. And that's a part of the planning process. How do you prepare? You prepare by bringing the right content. And by the way, we are moving into the era where we are going to have content revolution. And when we're talking about content revolution, each presentation that you create is actually a beautiful piece of content. And it's very essential to actually prepare through before you move on. Practice? Well, in the initial time, you will have to practice, but soon you will realize that you can actually handle, if you prepare the presentation, you can actually handle it extempore. Then you will come to a point of unconscious competence where you could actually pick up a presentation on the fly and start delivering it because you have great confidence that has already been built in. And then you actually present the presentation. And how do you present the presentation? You primarily present the presentation with certain verbal and non-verbal cues that you send across. But the whole idea of presenting is that you need to have the audience create positive emotions about your presentations. A lot of times presentations tend to put off people, and that's not the way to actually give a great presentation. Stages of presentation, let's discuss them again. So when you're talking about a pre-stage, that's the preparation stage before the presentation, where you gather the information about your audience. The during stage, and while you're doing the pre-stage, you're also preparing the presentation. The during stage is when you're actually conducting the presentation, and the post stage where you're actually auditing your presentation. And this entire conversation, which actually focus on these three aspects of presentation. Let's look at the pre-presentation. Now, what's important in pre-presentation? The content. What is it that your audience needs? And by the way, I'm emphasizing on the audience continuously because a lot of presenters are fascinating in terms of their style of presentation, but tend to deliver a content which is of no relevance to the audience. So, in a pre presentation, plan your content well, plan your layout well. And when you're talking about a layout, what are you talking about? Your presentation must have certain data, it must have graphics, it must have a great design, it has to have a visual, because different people connect with different aspects of presentation. Some people connect with pictures, some people connect with data, some people connect with the emotion associated with the presentation. And that's where your layout becomes very important. How do you actually sequence your slides? How do you organize them? Also becomes one another aspect of a great presentation. And the use of technology is something which is extremely essential when it comes to presentation, because if you're not using technology effectively, you could actually run into major problems. And technology is a great aspect when it comes to presenting. And what are those different tools that you're using? You could use your PowerPoints, you could use videos plugged in, you could use a whole lot of tools, and that can actually make a lot of benefit for you. So the pre-presentation is actually capturing a whole lot of basic essence of your presentation and deciding how it is going to be structured, how is it going to look like, what are the technology tools that you're going to plug in, and what is the medium of technology that you're going to use to deliver this presentation. I deliver a lot of my presentation through videos, through live streaming, and a lot of them through face to face. And by the way, using technology helps you because you're beating the aspect of time and space. And in corporate organizations, you would use a lot of web based technologies to actually deliver your presentations. How do you develop a content? Keep in mind the following questions. All the W's have to be handled. Why are you giving this presentation? Identify the purpose of your presentation. Who are your listeners? Who's your audience? What is it that you need to prepare for? What are the different ingredients? What are the different things that you need to do? How many people do you actually have to send an invite? Do you have to send a pre presentation information to people? So all that is a part of your preparation. And then you sequence your presentation well so that it gives you a structure and a very smooth flow as you move. And where are you giving this presentation? I think the environment makes a lot of difference. Don't give your presentation in a bad place, please, because a best of the presentation delivered in the worst of the places can actually create a whole lot of problems for people. So get these W's in place, and when you get these W's in place, you've got a strong foundation set. You've got your fundamentals right when you're moving into presentation. How do you organize your presentation? When you're organizing your presentation, organize it in a way where you're going to tell the people what you're going to tell them. You're going to tell the people what you're going to tell them. And when you tell the people what you're going to tell them, what happens is they get prepared. Yeah. This also helps them to time their questions. It also helps them to understand how much is the time that the presentation could consume. So you tell them what you're going to tell them. You also tell them why they should listen to you. What is the benefit of your presentation? And then you actually tell them. And in the end, you tell them what you told them. So there are three aspects of presentation, remember. First, you tell them what you want to tell them. Then you tell them. And then you tell them what you told them. And if you're able to do these three things always, it's going to make your presentation fantastic for sure. Effective layouts, maximum 20 slides for 1 hour presentation, plus or minus some percentages here and there. But don't pack your deck with too many slides, please. You're going to run horribly out of time, and people normally, after 10 slides, start counting how many slides are there after the presentation. Number of lines per slide could be around 5 to 8. 8 is stretched, 7 is great. Anything below 5, people will think that your slides are empty. And by the way, remember, a slide should not become more powerful than the presenter. If the slide becomes more powerful than the presenter, then the presenter is of no consequence when it comes to presentation. A lot of presentations and a lot of presenters are actually fantastic in terms of delivering presentations without the slides. Layout should be same throughout the entire presentation. Don't change your fonts, don't change your logos where they're placed. So a lot of times organizations tend to have standard templates, which is a great idea. The choice of fonts, absolutely legible, and we have realized that ideally Arial, Calibri, Trebuchet, these are the ones that actually tend to do well in presentations. Character text size, at least 18 point size, 28 point size for titles, plus or minus as far as your comfort is concerned, you can work on that. Less of text, more of visuals can help. And even if you're putting text in, please pack it up with visuals, because visuals tend to create a pattern, and a lot of people want detail and pattern both together. Try and minimize your use of animation. I've seen a lot of presenters who use too much of animation in the presentation, and then ultimately what happens is people tend to lose focus on the presenter, and they tend to understand the presentation more through animations, and that could be a major issue. Avoid tables and too many rows and columns, please, because if the data is too cluttered, your presentation may not be looking too great. Yeah, so these could be essential aspects of effective presentation. Techniques. You know what I do? I normally write down the content on small pieces of paper. Uh, if you may call them chits of paper. And then I lay those chits of paper on a table or maybe on the floor. And then I start taking a feel in terms of how the sequence looks like. And then, if I feel complete with the sequence, that's when I get the proper structure. You may want to try this, because what happens is on a deck, some people may not be too practiced in terms of how the sequence should go, and the feel of the presentation in terms of flow is very critical. You cannot have speed breakers while you present. You cannot have suddenly moving from one point to another point on a tangent. Therefore, the flow is very crucial. Make use of bullet points wherever you're highlighting important aspects. Use colors, animations, pictures, and sound very wisely, something that I've said before. And prepare readers' notes or card for easy reference. A lot of times we tend to give data, we tend to quote research, and people don't believe it, because people tend to think that presenters create a lot of research data on the fly. Now, when you carry cards, it kind of gives an authenticity to any data that you may be wanting to talk about in the presentation. Tools can be slides, videos and sounds, multimedia, certain overheads that you could use. And I tend to use a lot of overheads because if I'm addressing around 300, 400 set of audience, then overheads tend to do a damn good job there. Beamers, laptops, laser points are definitely required. The more technology you use, see, look at the whole idea of a presentation. The presentation is a part of your branding. And if you're able to set up with a great layout, and if you're able to use right tools, you can actually create a great branding for yourself. Look at a whole lot of leaders across the world when they address their people. What do? They have huge screens, they have huge overheads, and that actually starts magnifying the whole context of your presentation. Don't overdo it, please. It has to be the right set for the right content that you're delivering. During the presentation, focus on your body language. Don't turn your back. It's very important to give eye contact to people, and if you're going in for a large audience, you may want to scan your eyeballs through the entire space. It's very important. It makes people feel good. Body language, don't be too pompous. It's not the right thing to do while you're giving a presentation. Keep your speech slow. Yeah, not too slow, but slower than how you would normally talk. Because remember, Different people in the audience will have different pace. During the presentation, keep your environment around you clean. Don't show a cluttered environment. That could create a problem for you. Attire should be one step above the audience. Don't be overly dressed. Flow. During the presentation, manage your flow well. There is some aspect that I keep conscious about. There is an energy that the audience starts creating in the room. Be focused, be aware of that energy. When the energy starts dropping, you may want to change your flow. May want to pace it. You could also be very conscious about the non-verbal expressions that the audience is giving you, and then you can place your flow accordingly. Yeah, that's about the presentation. A little more on body language. Stand tall, which doesn't mean that you have to be tall, but you got to stand in a way that is relaxed, but it's also respectful. Limit your gestures, please. Too much of gesturing could actually be distracting for people. Facial expressions, positive, always help. Voice, uh, not to be feeble. Speak into the mic, make sense, and have a tone where you're not shouting, but you're not whispering either. Now, how do you get to know that? If you're conscious about how your audience is responding, you will know that. And always, like I said, keep giving an eye contact. Eye contact shows confidence that you have in yourself. The environment that we talked about, greet the audience well. That creates a nice environment. The emotional aspect of environment is very crucial. How do you build a rapport? Some amount of humor helps. Some amount of great opening statements help. And humor can keep flowing. Stories are beautiful to build rapport. I think presentations full of stories do extremely well. A lot of times audience give inputs, and you got to acknowledge the inputs, got to thank it. It makes people feel important. And don't make your presentations negative, please. Keep them positive as far as possible. And if you do have to deliver a negative message, please ensure that the negative message is ultimately reframed in terms of some positive context for sure. The human brain gets extremely irritated with negative language. The flow of the presentation, the beginning, is always about capturing interest. Mention the purpose in brief, and relate the subject to the audience well. Right? So, in the beginning, you're basically capturing the intent of the presentation. You're telling them what you're going to tell them. In the middle aspect of the presentation, have three or four main points, ask them questions, and summarize. Questions are good. You may not be getting answers if the crowd is huge, but questions start creating insights in the mind. Human beings love to think. I think, therefore I am. That's the whole idea, right? And therefore, questions help people to remain focused on the presentation. A lot of times, presenters don't ask questions. And these questions should be insightful questions, please. End by summary. Tell them what you told them. And then makes sense to have a great QA. And by the way, while you have a question answer session, don't get too data focused. Stories do extremely well because people connect with metaphors much more easily. Wear comfortable and presentable clothes. Avoid bold colors, gaudy accessories. Don't look gross. Ensure good hygiene and always smell good. Well, why should you smell good? Because you feel good when you smell good. And that's what you tend to do. That's what makes a lot of difference when it comes to presentations. Maybe there are some people on the panel who are sitting next to you and they don't want you to be with a person who looks clumsy. Yeah. So, attire, hygiene, very crucial. Post presentation, QA, very essential because QA shows how knowledgeable you are. Makes sense a lot of times to distribute handouts. We're living in a green environment. Digital handouts are damn good, fantastic, so do that. Discuss the follow up mechanism as to after the presentation. If people want to stay in touch with you, how can they stay in touch with you? Social media is a great platform. You could also create your own website by your own name, that also makes a good idea. Present a thanking note where you actually thank people who maybe invited you or helped you out. Maybe your team did your deck, all that you can do. And then comes the important part. Sit down with some people and take an evaluation of how you did. And by the way, the best evaluation is how did you feel end of the presentation. So that's the great aspect of the presentation part. And evaluation is something that a lot of people tend to miss on. So please do evaluate. Stress is an important aspect of presentation. And stress is good because if you're not stressed, you will not focus. While you're stressed, understand that you're stressed. How do you remain positive? Visualize that your presentation is going to end on a good note. Revise and practice your content well. Keep a check on food and drinks intake. Yeah, I mean, it's very important not to have a stomach full before the presentation, because if too much blood moves into the stomach, the brain is not going to function well. Yeah, so I normally tend to have a light intake when I'm giving a presentation. Identify situations that cause stress, and what I tend to do is I tend to consciously stay away from situations and scenarios that could cause stress before the presentation. Release the tension physically. A little bit of walk in the morning, or maybe some amount of work that you could do can actually help you in terms of releasing the tensions physically. Don'ts of effective presentation: don't show your back, don't get into too much of gesturing, tolerate indiscipline and misconduct. You're giving a presentation, you're not a headmaster there, right? And don't forget to thank the audience, please. Something that I talked about in the past. Don't forget to thank people who helped you in creation or the delivery of the presentation. Tips for effective presentation: understand your audience well, set your objective right. That normally happens through understanding your audience well, structure the presentation well, practice, practice, practice. Believe in your content. A lot of times, people who deliver presentation don't believe in their content. Arrive early. Don't arrive on time. A lot of times, Murphy plays up, right? So arrive before time. And I normally arrive 30 minutes before the presentation. Takes care of traffic, takes care of any last minute hiccups that could, create issues for you. Build initial rapport with the audience. Spend a couple of minutes in the beginning, and connect with the audience at an emotional level, please. Your presentations should focus on how will your audience win. I think rest of the presenters have given inputs in a way that audience have been able to understand it, and audience had a takeaway from there, and audience actually applied it and won in their life. And that's what great presentations is all about. Great presentation is all about helping people win in their lives. Remember this, people: remember the presenter more than the presentation. You will give a whole lot of inputs to people, but end of it, after maybe a few weeks, what's going to happen is people will only remember you. Thank you very much for your time in this conversation. These are the essential elements of giving a great presentation, and maybe this quick short conversation will help you in terms of brushing up your skill sets on giving presentations. There are a whole lot of other skill sets that are available from us. They are available on this platform. Feel free to use them. Feel free to go ahead and implement them. They will definitely improve your effectiveness at work. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for focusing on this presentation.